More Chumba Casino fan mail. Love this. It says, Dear Ryan, I love Chumba Casino. There's so much fun. I love the wild ride from the social slots to the slingo to jackpots quicker than a 6-time real spin. Everybody's finding their fun at Chumba Casino. Why don't you find out for yourself? Head to ChumbaCasino.com and enjoy hundreds of casino-style games for free with your welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.
Assalamu'alaikum everyone. I hope you guys are doing amazing like always. Welcome back to another Late Night Talks episode. I am so happy to have you join me. I'm so happy to have you be a listener and be here with me. So you guys already know how this series goes. This is when I just like to sit down late at night with my mic. No script, no nothing. I just go on Instagram and I tell my listeners, tell me what's on your mind. What do you want me to talk about? And I yap, and y'all give, and you'll tell me what you want, and I give it to you. So this is just that. So all the topics that I'm going to cover today, inshallah, are sent in by my listeners. I do want to give a preface that if I sound annoying and gross, spare me. Honestly, guys, I've had the worst case of I don't even know what for the last 2 months, at least when I'm recording this. And homegirls maxed out on steroids and antibiotics. So now we're doing what they did in the caveman era, which was, tough it out. So that's what I'm doing. And that's why I haven't been able to record an episode in so long. Because I was like, I just sound so not like me. Like I sound so gross. Like I feel like everyone would get the ick. But I was like, you know what? It's been too long. It's been too long since I've recorded. So hopefully it's not that bad. And you guys aren't like, ew, shut up. But inshallah, something I say in this episode can still benefit you, and you guys can look past, me not sounding so hot right now. So, I asked you guys on Instagram to send in questions. You guys, of course, did, and inshallah, we'll get into our first one right now. Okay, so our first one is a beautiful one. Mashallah, it says, how to have a religious household, incorporating religion to your days in your 20s. I love this question. I think that it's very beautiful and it's very thoughtful. So, for starters, I think when it comes to a system of a household, we have to remember that just like all things, there are levels and there are responsibilities, and there's ways that things go and way that things happen. Now, when you're living with people, and if they are not the most practicing, of course, the unsaid obvious that for better or for worse, one or the other can rub on each other. Now, it's very important that if you are the person in your house that prays, that is religious, that is very, very steadfast in their deen and is very mindful of that, then you want to try your best to stay as firm and as disciplined as you can about that. You don't want it to come to a point where you are going to the opposite end of the spectrum because your family may be like that. Maturing is realizing that you can be religious and that your scope and your beliefs on certain topics are going to differ completely from your family, completely from your parents. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. And it's not, let's point the blame, one person's right and you're wrong. It's just that there's some things that are the way they are for some people, and there are some things that are the way they are for you. And there's a level of healthy discussion we can have about it, but then there comes to a max. There's only so much healthy discussion you can have about something until it comes to a point where the discussion is just not healthy anymore. And when we see that we're not getting anywhere with this discussion, I feel like it's better to not have it, right? I think it's better at that point to just respect the other person's belief and move, as accordance to that, because more often than not, it leads to unnecessary fights and arguments. So I'm not saying that necessarily, people that don't pray, that do those things are right. It's not right. But there's only so much advice that you can give someone, only so many times that you can continue to advise someone. And I'd recommend that you continue to persistently do it in different forms, whether that's in communication or even within your action, and gentle reminders, right? But you never want it to be at a point where you and that person are getting aggressive and you're angry. So that's that. The next thing, if everyone in your household is practicing, or you are someone in your 20s about to start a family and starting your own household, or you're living alone and you just want your own house to be a place where this deen is constantly, frequently, brought up and mentioned, some things in general that I would always recommend. And these are not necessarily something that I think is in ranking of importance, just things that I think kind of help incorporate this thing more in our day-to-day environment. Because I can tell you on a big scale that, you should be someone who's practicing, you should be someone who's deen cautious, who's cautious of the sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and who's cautious of following the Quran and adhering to it. But I want to tell you some things that you can do at a day-to-day to make your house feel more align religiously and have more of that concept of deen within it. So the first thing, of course, is having your 5 daily prayers being done in a house. I think that's very vital. I think that having the azan play in a house is also very important. I feel like that's something that I personally grew up with. My parents very much emphasized it. And so now for me, this is something that I try my best to strive to always have. Because even generally, I think that it's a very good reminder to remind you to go pray, to remind you that this is an opportunity to do good, to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not something on a checklist you have to do. This is a call to talk to Allah and just get away from the anxieties of this world, right? So that's that. Next one. Another thing that I like to do is make sure I play the Quran at least once a day. Whether that's doesn't matter when. I sometimes do it right when I wake up, and I sometimes do it at night, whether that's Surah Baqarah or Surah Yasin. Doesn't have to be a thing in particular, but I try my best to at least do Surah Baqarah daily, because there is a lot of benefits in that one. Of course, there's benefits in every surah, but Surah Baqarah, that's another thing that always happened in my home. So it's a habit. So that's one of those things. And then I remember my mom, she also had a habit of playing Surah Rahman every morning. So that's also a habit. So there's different things that like you pick up from your parents and from your family. And of course, that's like the whole beauty of, having a religious household or having people that practice, I guess you could say. So that's why those are some things I'd recommend. The other thing I'd also recommend is at least having a time once a week where everyone gets together and talks about, life. Because I think that this kind of correlates into having a more steadfast household. When we have a time where we all sit down and talk about, this is what's going on in my life, this is what's going on in your life, this is what I'm looking forward to, this is what I'm not looking forward to. I think that it's a very important way for everyone to be on the same page. When you live in a house with other people, this is not corporate land. This is not I come home and I sleep in my bed and we all go different ways, right? That's something I never want in my house. Like, I don't ever want it to be like, oh, it's like a bajillion different people living their own life in their own way, and this is just like you just come here to sleep. Like, I want everyone to be involved in the care of others and in the life of others, right? There's so many times you see siblings that have grown up together and they don't know anything about each other. They don't even know where the other person is majority of the time. And like for me, growing up, my parents really emphasized having good sibling bonds. My mom was always like, Hera, you won't see it now, but when you grow up, you'll realize that your sister's all you have. I was like, oh my God, here we go again. Like, here we go again. But she's right. She's right. So I think it's really important to be involved in the people in your house's life. Obviously not in an invasive way. If you have children, like be involved in what they're learning about in school, be involved about what their goals are, what they have their mind on. A lot of times, I don't have kids, so I'm not going to give you parenting advice. I'm just going to say on a general consensus, when parents are not involved in their kids' lives and kids have interests and likes and dislikes and things that they want to talk about and things that they want to share and emotional needs that they think need to be addressed and heard and validated for, and they don't have a place to talk about that because their parents are too busy, then that's when kids start to confide outside. And that's not always the best course of action, and that's not something that should be done. And so that's why I think it's so important that families are actually involved in being a family, not like being corporate, not just we live here and this is the bed and we sleep in it and this is your bedroom. Like, it shouldn't be like that. It should be that a family is involved in being a family and being involved in each other's lives, obviously not in an invasive way, but in a way to be there. So I think it's important that we have these weekly rounds, that we see where everyone is at. And then, of course, it obviously comes down to you yourself, making sure that you are striving in this deen, striving to be a good Muslim in the best way possible, of course. So I hope that kind of answered your question. I don't know if I gave you exactly what you were looking for, but I think that it comes with little tidbits that you incorporate within your family, that you weave into a system. And then I think that it also comes with you yourself practicing and doing the things that you have to do, right? So that's what I'll say on that. Our next question. Oh, this is not a question. This one's sweet. Anything you talk about is beneficial for us. That's sweet of you. I, you know, stop. Y'all are so cute. Love you, Illy Hearts. So cute. May Allah bless you. And honestly, just praise Allah any goodness you see, bro, because it ain't me. Next one. Okay, this one is interesting. Parental relations in the West, but prioritizing Islam. Tell me why the person who sent this is one of my friends. Homegirl. I'm kind of wondering why she sent this because you're not a parent, girl. What's going on? I'm not either. Why are you asking me? Okay, parental relations in the West, but prioritizing. I feel like I kind of covered that in my last question, where I talked about making sure that incorporating your kids in the best way possible in this theme. Again, I don't have kids, so I'm gonna give limited words on this one because I think that there's some things you learn in life. But incorporating your kids, of course, in this theme and making them do the things that they should be doing, right? A lot of times at a young age, people think that, oh, my child's young, he got time, he got time. Your child is young and he got a fresh brain. You better put that kid in his. I'm kidding, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. I'm saying that you better find their interest and help them weave into it and go for it, right? A lot of times what happens is that young children who end up in hifz, who end up in different things and memorizing the Quran at a young age and they didn't want to do it, a lot of times it comes down to the fact that it was put upon them in such a negative way that they resented it or they didn't understand why they were doing it, right? So I think that if you take the time to teach your children what they're doing and why, and if this is a path that they want to choose and, something that's going to be good for them, of course, in this life and the next, then I think that it becomes easier. I also think that at a young age with children, beyond deen, beyond teaching them about the sunnah and beyond teaching them about Islam and whatnot, if there's one thing that you should teach your kids, and if there's one thing that I could have written on my forehead, shout on the top of my lungs to the entire world, it'd be this: teach your kids healthy coping mechanisms, because I promise you they will go so far and become so successful in life if you do, inshallah. Of course, with their deen in hand and with all those characteristics and embodiments of the prophets, peace and blessings be upon all of them. But if you teach your children healthy coping mechanisms, and I think that it's never too late to learn. I'm telling you that I never think it's too late to learn healthy coping mechanisms. I know I said that I'll talk about this question for a little bit, but now we're rerouting and I'm going to talk about this for a fat minute, okay? So just listen to me talk real quick. Healthy coping mechanisms is one of the most important things in life that if you haven't learned it yet, I want you to learn it, because I promise you that life, your outlook and your ability to handle life changes. This is coming from someone who thought that they had a lot of healthy coping mechanisms. I remember when I really first got close to this thing, that was my coping mechanism. And it still is. Like, of course, beyond coping mechanism, this is the way of life for me. I resort to this thing. I try my best to resort to this thing, not just in bad times, but in good. I try to remember Allah in both times because I know that that's the right thing to do, of course. And of course, I'm not a perfect Muslim. I can improve in all aspects, but this deen is a way of life. And a way of life is a practical thing, okay? So what happens is sometimes you meet people that are very, very religious, that are good Muslims, that are good people. They just don't know how to cope with difficult emotions. And that's a problem. Because when you don't know how to cope with difficult emotions, despite the fact that you're a religious person, you can act out in ways that are not so good and not so accordance with this deen, because you don't know what else other way to control your nafs. I can tell you a bunch of different, Quran ayahs, I can tell you a bunch of different things, but until you don't physically learn how to cope with it, grab whatever that is within you that's bugging you and learn how to deal with it, the words I say to you are not going to matter. Now, there's some people that know how to grab it, that know how to deal with it, but there's no peace of mind. There's no contentment because they don't have this deen to guide them in the way of life. You need both. This deen is obviously the ultimate comfort, the ultimate path, the ultimate thing. I'm not saying to divert from this and look for peace anywhere else. I'm saying learn how to manage things. You have to manage these different branches. This deen is obviously a way of life, and we stand by it in all aspects. But when something rough happens to you, when you're going through a hard time, for example, look, if you're angry, I know some people that are very angry and impulsive. And those people have also happened to be some of the most religious people I've ever met. I have a very perpetual big fear of people that don't know how to control their anger and people that are very, very impulsive. It's something that I fear very, very tremendously, and I don't ever want to like end up in a situation where I'm, forced to be with people like that, because I know that it doesn't end well, right? May Allah make it easy, but people that are very, very angry, that are very, very impulsive. Unfortunately, some of the most angry and impulsive people I've met have been very religious. And I'm not questioning their deen, because you can tell, right? There's some things that you can just tell about someone, and you can tell that they regret feeling or saying the words that they said when they were angry. You can tell they regret the decisions they made when they were impulsive. And they know Islamically that it's not right and they shouldn't have done it, but they don't know how to control themselves in that moment, right? So there has to be a different way that you learn to control yourself. Daily actions, little things that help divert and calm down your entire little system so you can actually think rationally. Because the human being is a very, very, very strong, very strong in feeling emotions. Very strong. When you're very angry, your entire body's feeling red and hot, and you're like, I'm gonna, just turn this house upside down, and you're so angry that words and anything anyone says to you in that moment won't matter. But if you learn from a young age what you should resort to when you are angry, you will notice that things will get better for you. For example, I'll tell you some of the things I do when I feel certain emotions. So whenever I feel angry, I'm personally not the type of person to get like really angry. I don't tweak often. You don't gotta I feel like a lot of things, I'm just not a person that gets bothered, right? Like I was in the womb and I was just nonchalant from day one. No, I'm kidding. I was not. Listen, I'm just not the type to tweak out about stuff. Like a lot of things don't bug me. And if I do get angry, I feel like I'm not like the type of angry that's like raging. I'm gonna flip this table. I'm gonna punch a hole in the wall. No, I'm just like I'm like the quiet angry. I'm just like, oh, okay. And like internally, I'm like screaming, but like no one will ever know. That's my angry, right? But then there's some people, when they get angry, they are gonna turn the table upside down. They are gonna punch a hole in the wall, and you just gotta be like, what's going on with you, dude? So you know what? They tweak out, bouncing off the wall. Like that's how some people are. But I'll tell you, when I get angry, my anger, alhamdulillah, all praise to Allah, because honestly, I know that whatever things that you have within you that are controllable or that are good, it's honestly because Allah had that mercy on you. So it's never me, but my anger has never been the type where I'm like, well, I'm super ragey, I'm uncontrollable. It's never been that. I've just been like, okay, that made me mad, and I'll like distance myself for a bit. So what I like to do when I get really mad is I like to go on a walk. I like to go on a run, or I like to exercise. And it's very hard to do that when your entire life, all you know is when I'm angry, I'm going to punch a hole in the wall and start throwing things upside down. It's really hard to do that because that's all you're comfortable with. But you're letting your emotions rage you out, and that's not a healthy coping skill. That's not how you react when you are angry. You're gonna feel negative emotions. It's not that you're not. You are, but you gotta have a healthy way of coping with them. So some people, when they get angry, they like to go alone, just kind of step away from everyone, isolate themselves, and take a couple deep breaths. And when they feel calmer, they like to read the Quran. They just need to get away first, though. And that's a healthy way of going about things. Same thing with, some people like to go on dhikr walks, like to do those things. I'll tell you that I did not grow up learning healthy coping mechanisms, which is why I'm so passionate about this. I learned how to cope with different emotions. I feel like when I turned 17, 18, I feel like I started to kind of understand the idea more. And I think that when I turned 19 and 20 is when I really flourished in understanding what works for me. Because before, I was the type of person that when I used to get angry, I used to not act out, but I used to just want to sit in my bed all day under my blanket and I would just sit there, seething, quiet. And that wasn't good for me or my health. I would just be sitting there, hypertension, girls up in the air. I would just sit there raged all day. And it would come to a point where my anger would only go down if I had slept. And it was the next day. But sometimes it used to come the next day to I used to just be in a bad mood. And that's not a way of coping with things. You might not be harming someone else, but you're harming yourself. So it took me a lot of time to come to a point where when I felt angry, I said, no, even if I don't feel it, I'm gonna go to the gym. Even if I don't feel it, I'm going to go for a walk. Sometimes when I'm feeling really, really sad, this is another one. When I feel sad, if I feel really, really sad, I just feel just down, I like to just get in my car and just drive straight. Just drive straight and straight and straight. I just like to just go somewhere, right? Sometimes just drive straight, enjoy nature, look at the trees and whatever. And then sometimes I just like to go grocery shopping. It makes no sense. It seems stupid. It seems like a waste of time. But there's something about just getting out of the scenery, just doing something random that's not like prioritizingly urgent, that just kind of clears your mind. If I feel like I'm in the mood to talk to a friend, then I would talk to a friend. I would meet up and talk to someone. But sometimes I just like to sit alone. And these are different ways that people cope with things. Sometimes when I feel very, very anxious, I notice that for me, of course, deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, I'm a firm believer in it. Deep breathing, doing somatic exercises helps, but I also notice that when I'm very anxious, I need to do something with my hands. So that's when I like to paint. That's when I like to punch needle. That's when I like to make different things out of like clay and whatnot. Like that's when I like to just use my hands. That's when I like to bake and cook. Some of my best recipes came from when I just need to do something with my hands. Okay. So one time wonder. So you just gotta like find ways to manage because throwing a vomit of mean words and what have you on someone else when you're angry and then being like, sorry, didn't mean that, oopsies, like it's not, you said what you said, you're gonna have to own up to it, right? Like you can't just back down on it. I know some people in my life who when they get really mad, they'll just throw a vomit of words and just like the meanest outrageous things, and I just be sitting there like, really? And then they'll come back like 3 minutes, you circle. I didn't mean any of that. Tee I was just angry. I'll laugh and I'm like, but you said it and it hurt me. So it's like, that's my point. Now you're okay. I'm not. So it's like, we need to know how to manage our emotions without dumping it on the next person. And this is also very important when it comes to building new relationships, whether that's friendships, marriages. The other person in any relationship is not responsible of making you happy. I'm a firm believer in that. I know some people say that's mean. Us as human beings struggle to make our own selves happy. Making someone else happy, taking that responsibility is very difficult, right? Like your presence and who you are as a contribution in someone else's life can make them happy, right? Like if you and someone are very independent and you have your own life going and you're very, just well-rounded, of course, having like a partner or a friend or someone who's also very purposeful can make you happy, but that person can't take the responsibility of making you happy, right? So you have to know how to manage yourself with or without people. It's very important. And often when I talk about things like this, people are like, oh, well, this is basic. Everyone knows this. You'd be surprised because you think you know it until the next time you're feeling anxious, sad, or mad, and you just shut yourself in your room all day. Sometimes you'll see that conflict will happen, fights among households, among family members. Guess what? Maybe your way of coping is just turning the entire world upside down, slamming doors, being like, everyone be quiet. I don't want to talk to nobody. Well, that's not the right thing to do, especially when there's a conflict and there's a fight going on. Like you have to know how to manage things at right times without harming others. And when we teach children this from a young age, they understand what they should resort to. Of course, ultimately resorting to reading the Quran, praying your salah, doing your dhikr, talking to Allah. That's one that I always try to do no matter what. I always try to talk to Allah whenever I feel very uncertain about my emotions or whenever I feel any emotion very strongly. I think that human beings, again, like I said, we have the capacity to feel so strongly, and it's honestly very, very scary. Whether that's love, happiness, anger, that's sadness. Like when you feel it real hard, and I don't think that extreme of anything is good. I don't think extreme happiness is good. I don't think extreme love is good. I don't think extreme sadness is good. I don't think extreme anxiety is good. So in all circumstances, like I try my best to talk to Allah to regulate my emotions. So I think you guys got my point, but that's one thing that I think is very important. Of course, after like deen and teaching them about this religion. All right. So next one, emotional intelligence, overthinking, and tawakkul. Interesting. Set of 3. Interesting. 3 for 3. Interesting. So Emotional intelligence, I think, is obviously very important. You guys know that. And I think that it doesn't just come in you understanding your own emotions and you being self-aware of yourself, but also being self-aware and aware of others and how you made them feel. I'm a very firm believer that being emotionally intelligent is being self-aware, yes, of good and bad, especially both aspects. Because a lot of times some people are just really self-aware of their bad and not of their good, so they put themselves down all the time. And then some people are really self-aware of their good and become very arrogant about it and don't notice their bad. But emotional intelligence within oneself, of course, improving yourself, becoming a better Muslim, and understanding your needs and wants and how you react, like we talked about in the healthy coping mechanism aspect, understanding how you react and what triggers you and what does it. That's something that you're going to learn throughout this life. But I'm a firm believer that if you want to become more emotionally intelligent, you should first learn how to obtain more humility. And after humility, you will learn how to become more teachable. And through becoming teachable and having humility, you'll be able to be more emotionally intelligent because you'll understand that you don't know it all and you always have the room to learn. When we go into relationships and we go into just anything, thinking that we know how the other person feels, regardless of what we did to make them feel that way, first of all, you're not teachable because I'm a firm believer in feelings being cause and effect. Always. I know that that might sound logical. People are like, oh, you sound like a man. I know. I just like, there's some moments where I feel like I really sound like a man. And I'm just like, Hera, you're not like that. But listen, I'm a firm believer that some things are cause and effect, and emotions are one of them. Like, I felt hurt because you did something, okay? Or you felt hurt because I did something. Now, whether or not we agree on whether my action was hurtful or not, I can't deny the fact that you feel hurt. So, like I said, emotional intelligence can be found on the route of first finding humility and through humility, learning to be a teachable person. Because whether we like it or not, feelings majority of the time are cause and effect. And that's not something me and you can change, but we can understand what the cause is and what the effect is. But if you don't have humility to learn and you're not a teachable person, you're always going to be right and someone's always going to be wrong. And a lot of times I'm a firm believer that the person who thinks they're always right is wrong. So you have to understand that in the grand scheme of things, emotional intelligence is not just about you within you learning how this makes me feel that type of way. I can tell you all the ways that I feel loved. I can tell you how I feel unloved. I can tell you how I might feel upset. I can tell you a lot of things about what emotions make me feel what way. And you can tell me a lot about the way that, you feel about you and what makes you feel what way. But emotional intelligence comes and bridges out when it comes time to understand each other. And a lot of times people say they have emotional intelligence, but when it comes time to understand the next person, they don't. Like, people will ramble about emotional intelligence and it'll be all about, I feel loved this way and I feel upset this way and I don't like when you do this. But when it comes time to be intelligent enough to understand that this person feels hurt, I don't get to be the one that says, no, you don't. No, you don't. Like, that's not my place. People get defensive. It becomes war. You're super, super angry over something that doesn't require you to be angry. The next thing I'll say about emotional intelligence, coming away from emotional intelligence within yourself and what makes you feel like, what makes you feel understood and not understood. When we talk about emotional intelligence in the sense of people and in the sense of what makes people feel heard and seen, you also have to understand that, because at a different time you would think that what works for you works for everyone, and it doesn't. Like, I have some friends where before they start to vent to me, I say to them, one, is this a vent or do you want a solution? And two, do you need a lecture or do you need a hug? Because a lot of times I have some friends, they want me to give them a lecture. I'm like, just grab me the mic, like, let's go. And then I have some friends that don't want me to say anything. And the way that I am there for them is just by sitting there with them, giving them a hug and letting them cry it out. And I know that I'm a both. I'm a both type of person. I've had times where I've went to my friends and I'm like, you need to ramble. You need to tell me what to do because I'm stressed. This is my situation. And there's been times when I've sat with my friends just outside at the park on a bench and just cried in their arms and they just hugged me. I remember so many low moments of my life. My best friend, she would try her best to be there for me. And I would be like, just don't talk to me. Just be there. And she'd just be there. She'd give me a little shoulder and I'd just cry. And I remember that being like the lowest times of my life because I'm like not the type person to cry in front of everyone. Like we established, I'm a very nonchalant person. But there's been times where that was just what happened. There's times when as a human being you can't necessarily gather all the emotions and you can't understand everything and just erupt. But it requires emotional intelligence to understand that. It requires emotional intelligence to understand that not everyone feels like you're showing up for them just because you feel like you are. And that's really important because you can be thinking that you're doing a lot to make this person feel like you're showing up for them and like you are showing the best interest, but they might not feel that. And if they tell you that I feel like you're not showing up or you're not having best interest of mind for me, you can't be offended. You can't be like, oh my God, how dare you say that? Because maybe it isn't a matter of what you're doing or not doing. Maybe it's the fact that you are doing, which is incredible, but you aren't talking to their love language. And that's, again, where emotional intelligence comes in. Understanding that everyone has like their own little love language, their own little way of feeling heard. You know, a lot of times people go into relationships thinking that you should already know how to be there for a person and how to love this person and how to, just emotionally read them. And, I remember I saw a scholar talk about this and he was like, two people in any relationship, even in a friendship, y'all are like two different streams that go down different ways and then you come together and you are not supposed to know how to love this person. You're not supposed to know how to be there for that person. That's something you learn. But if on the first infraction, you'll be like, cut, you done. How dare you do that? Like, you're going to be so short-tempered. Oh my God, like we're not going to get anywhere. And that's the same thing with friends. I remember with some of my friends, we don't talk for months, right? But we understand each other's love language and we understand what makes the other person feel shown up for or whatnot it might be. Whether that's a phone call randomly, whether that's being there for each other physically, going to, showing up to different events of theirs that might make them feel like someone is there. Like there's different ways to feel like someone is showing up for you and someone cares about you. And those ways are not the same for everyone. And you need to be emotionally intelligent to not be defensive about that. I hope I kind of made sense regarding that. Becoming emotionally intelligent, I think the greatest ways that I don't know if I would say I'm emotionally intelligent. I try my best, but I feel like, I don't know, like I think I'm pretty good at it. I think for the most part, like I understand why people feel the way they feel, and I understand if I've upset someone. Like, I've had many difficult conversations, even with the closest people in my life, and it tore me. Like, it was hard, but it was never like letting go was an option. It wasn't like, oh, we're done. Like, no, I always see relationships as something that's fixable. Of course, there's a couple red lines that you shouldn't cross, but I always think that relationships are fixable. And I think that as long as both you're emotionally intelligent on the other person and how they are, then it's okay. You can learn, you can adapt. Us as human beings, we've been adapting, girl. We'll be fine, And that's just that. But if there's no will, honestly, there's no way. So I hope I kind of covered that. When it comes to overthinking and tawakkul, I think that it's very important to ultimately remember one thing. One of the things that I make dua for, especially when I see myself overthinking and having a hard time with tawakkul, is that I always tell Allah that I know what I want, but I want what you want. One of the greatest things that I ever did, just especially in my 20s, was let my desires rest, because I learned that through that I found peace. I found peace in not putting expectations and having insane amount of desires on things or people, because I learned that at the end of the day, it's going to happen the way Allah wants it. So why should I not be a good servant to Allah and submit myself to the way that He wants things anyway? From the get-go, I want what He wants because I know that what He wants for me is best. I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to be resentful about it. I'm not going to go against it and say, why did Allah not give me what I wanted? Like, Allah's going to do what is best for me in all circumstances. So I always try my best to ask Allah for what's best. When I noticed that my desires, there was many times in my life where I felt like my desires suffocated me. I felt like what I wanted had to be my way or was the highway. But really learning in my 20s, let your desires rest and let your desires that infiltrate that love of Allah from you, let them rest. Everything dies if you let it starve. And that's the opinion that I keep about desires. So it was really hard in the beginning. I feel like when I turned 20, my frontal lobe, it was just like, yeah, girl, let's start developing. So it just started developing. And I feel like one of the things that really brought a lot of peace in my life was letting desires starve and die. I'm not saying to not strive for good or have things you don't want in life. Of course, but there's things I want to do, there's things I want to be, there's things I want to experience, but there's nothing I want more than Allah. And there's nothing I want more than what He wants. So if Allah has something for me and He's like, no, then okay, it's a no from me too. And I think that accepting that with open arms and having that tawakkul, it didn't come from watching a bunch of lectures. It didn't come from reading a bunch of Quran. It didn't come from, reading Salah. Well, those things help. I think those things came from seeing how my own desires in my past have choked me. And I think that some things you have to learn in life, some things you have to go through them to learn them. And I think that there was many times that my own desires and what I wanted literally pushed me at the face of death. Like literally just made me do bad. Just not good, not good, not good. It just made life, my quality of life and my decisions not good. And those things, when you come out of it and you reflect on what your desires can make you do, goodness gracious, your desires are crazy. Your desires can make you do things that you did not even think you were capable of doing. That's what's scary. Your soul, your nafs, a lot of it, when our desires and our nafs, they all start infiltrating between what is and what isn't and what we want. It should have been that way and it should have been this person, it should have been that. It becomes very painful to live within your own body. Your desires and a nafs that is uncontrolled makes it hard for you to live within your own body. And I'm telling you that it takes a lot of discipline and you have to be hard on yourself at times. But I do always tell people that the only way that I was able to let my desires die and starve and just let them be and lay it low was by self. It was through seeing so many different times that my own desires made me suffer. And it really taught me that I don't know what's good. And through those things, those trials, I learned how to have tawakkul in what Allah chooses for me. So I'm not saying that I don't ever feel sad when things don't go my way. Of course I do, but I feel like I've gotten better at accepting it because I know that it's what's right. So I think that that's something I'd tell you when it comes to overthinking and tawakkul. I have like 2 separate episodes. I think one on overthinking and one on tawakkul if you really want to talk about it more. But a lot of times overthinking and lack of tawakkul comes from desires and things that we want and questioning Allah and why is it not happening my way. It all starts from there. A lot of times it's rooted in the dunya, and so it's something that I think that if you let it starve, you let anything starve, it dies. So I think that that's one of those things. Anyway, we covered a lot of great topics in this episode. I hope that something I said benefited you and helped you in some way. I'm so grateful for all of you guys who constantly show your support and listen to me and just listen to me talk about these different topics. I have a bunch of topics from this story post that I did not cover, and inshallah I will cover in my next upcoming episodes. So if you sent something, you're not ignored. Hard eyes, I got you. Okay? Please take care of yourself. Have a great rest of your day. Assalamualaikum.